Alright, first step in checking and or replacing the front wheel bearings. I've jacked up the front end right here, the passenger side, to do one wheel at a time. So obviously taking this wheel off, and then first thing we're going to do after that is we have to take the caliper off right here. Let me focus in on that. Take the caliper off right here, and right back here, the brake line right here, the flex one obviously attached to the hard one, and the hard one's actually attached to the caliper. So in order to take the caliper off, we've got to disconnect the brake line. I'm just going to disconnect it right here since that's easier to get to. Then the little hard line will still be attached to the caliper. Don't actually have to take that off since we're not messing with the caliper. We just have to take that off in order to get to the front wheel bearing, which is going to be located right in here. Side note, on the driver's side, before you take the wheel off, or when you're taking the wheel off, if you haven't noticed already, driver's side has a little pin right here. It's actually attached to a cable that runs up to your dash for your odometer. So there's a little, let's see if it focuses, there's a little C-clip right there. You'll pop that off. Obviously it's super tiny, so make sure you put it in a safe spot. And then the pin will just, or the cable will just stay in there when you take the cap off. So just took apart the brake line. There it is sitting up, tucked back there. Other step for getting the caliper off, right back here, you got these two bolts. Right here. Right here. I'm going to spray them with PB Blaster, hopefully help break them loose a little bit, and then get a breaker bar to fit on here and see if I can get them loose with that. So if I didn't mention it before, the size of these bolts are actually the same that are for the lug nuts on the wheel itself. It's a 19mm socket. And then getting to taking off those two bolts for the caliper, like I said before, they're too hard to break just by hand, and there's not a ton of space to try and get the full force of the breaker bar. So obviously it's not going to turn too much because we're going to hit the fender, or underneath the fender right there, but we're just trying to break the seal because these probably haven't been taken off in many years. So got the breaker bar right there, piece of wood on a jack. Not the most glorious setup, but worked with the other side. There's that cracking, it's starting to break it loose. Looks like it's turning, so go ahead and drop it. So yeah, those creaks were it successfully breaking that bolt loose. I was just using this guy, got it to turn a couple times, so it'll come off. I'm just going to go ahead and break the second bolt loose, and we'll take that caliper off. So here are the two bolts that came out. The heads are both the same. Obviously, this guy's a little bit longer and narrower than this one is. So when you try to put them back in, I mean, this will go into both holes, but this one's only going to go into the right one. I was having that issue on the other one. Had one bolt in, but the other one just wasn't going, couldn't find it, so it was most likely I was trying to put this one into the smaller hole. So swapped them around, had no problem putting them back in. As for getting the caliper itself off, after those two bolts came out, you just have to worry about the hard line, because it's sitting, it comes into the back of this clip, or front I guess, because the front of the vehicle's right over here, comes into the front of this clip, and so you have to kind of twist the caliper. This is the base of it, had to twist that off so it would lean back, and then you get it off enough that you can get the hard line around this bracket, lift it forward and bring it out. So it was sitting like this. There's the hard line back there with the clip. You just tilted it back and lifted it out. On the bottom, let me turn this around for you. So here it is upside down. These are the actual brake pads, which have a lot still on them, so I'm not going to replace those guys. They look good. Probably clean all this off a little bit. And there's the hard line. And so these are going to be kind of pinching the brake pad, or the plate, and so you kind of have to get those to come around the plate. And once you work with them a little bit, you squeeze them apart, you see it drips a little bit. Some of the brake line, the pressure will come out as you push those apart, and so it'll get easier to come out once you work with it a little bit. Same thing with putting them back on. You'll just play with it a little bit, and then it'll go back onto where it belongs. All right, so after getting the caliper off, now we're going to go ahead and pop this cap off. You'll need a crowbar or something that's got kind of a hook on it. And so I've got this guy, put it right under that lip, right under there, and then you'll just pull it up. Let me focus on that for you. Right there, just as it is, and you'll just pull up. I'm not sure if I can get it with one hand, but I'm sure you can get the concept. Pull up on it a little bit, and then you'll just turn it. And every so often, there it goes a little bit. There it is. So once, as you saw, this pops off, and then there's your spindle in there and all the bearings, that grease. Let's see, grease, it's going to be the same as the other side. It's pretty baked in there. It's like, I mean, as grease is supposed to be kind of gooey, but it's thicker than it should be, which it's just old, doing its job for however many years. Time to replace it. And so I'll pull all that out. There's going to be a bolt right there, and so that's going to be either let me see, well, I'll clean it off real quick and then we'll see what size it is. Got it all cleaned up. You can see the bolt head right there, so go ahead and get that on there. And so that's going to be a 27 millimeter. Alright, so I broke loose I believe the actual term's an axle nut. I think I called it a bolt earlier, but this guy right here, axle nut. So go ahead and set that guy aside. Then we have this washer. So it has that little tooth on the inside there. And so there's, let me see if I can get you a closer look. So on the end of the spindle right there, right on this side, the tooth actually fits right in there. It won't fit anywhere else, so you can't really mess that up. So not too hard to mix that up when you're putting it back on or putting a new one on. If you're just completely replacing it like I am. Then we've got that shiny part right there. That's actually the outer bearing, because it's on the outside of the wheel. And then the race is going to be right out on the edge of it. So we're going to go ahead and punch the whole plate off and see if we can pull this off here. Okay, so there's the spindle. It actually, the plate slid right off once I took that axle nut off. It was threaded right at the end, so I took that off. Everything else was just resting on top of the spindle. So There, I've got it right there. I'll go ahead and take this over to the table, take all the parts out, and go ahead and clean out all the grease that's inside there. Alright, so I've got the plate over here. See if I can't give you a good angle inside. So, the outer bearing falls right out. Just grab it out with your finger. I got the race punched around the edge right there. So that's what we're going to try and get out next. That little lip right there that I got the light on, see it's only in that one spot. That's a little divot, and so when I flip it around from the other side, there's that little extra space that it gives me that I'll be able to put the punch. There's another one on the other side. Should be right in there. So flip it around, you'll have this punch, or any punch you have that fits in there, flipped around from the other side, and you'll get this snug in that divot, and then you'll just hit it with a hammer, and you'll just alternate it on either side, keep spinning it around or flipping which divot you're getting at, because you want to hit it pretty evenly. You hit one side too many times, it'll be all cross-eyed, and it's going to be a bitch to get that side out. So just try and alternate, and you'll have to hit it really hard. If you hit it too soft, it's not going to do anything, so you just keep hitting it hard until it pops out. It's going to be in there real snug, because the only thing that's holding it in there is just pure pressure from it being the exact same size as the hole that it's in. Alright, so I just finished punching out the race, the outer race right there. So, instead of doing it on this flat table here, since it's going to be coming out that hole right under there, and so that would sit flush. It started coming out, but figured it'd be a little bit easier or sure. I just went ahead, put it on the vise, squeezed it right there, and so it just dropped out and sat right there once I punched it out. Might have been unnecessary, but I just went ahead and did that. Figured it might be a little easier, wouldn't give me issues. So then now, I'm going to do the same thing with the inner race. So I grab my light. Now we're going to do the inner race. So the outer one was sitting right up here, or on the inside. Punched that out. So now we'll do the inner one. See if I can give you guys an angle in there. That's it down there. A shiny bit right in the center. That's the inner race, so that's what I'm going to punch out next. Then once we punch that out, I might do it before even, give me a better view. Go ahead and clean all the grease out and get as much out, because then we're going to go and put new grease in there with the new bearings, new races, and all that. And it'll be the same concept. There will be little divots in there, just like the top one, like right there. That was for that divot for the outer race. And so the inner one will have same ones. That's where you'll put the punch. If you're using punches to get the inner one out, and just alternate back and forth, hit it a couple times on one side, a couple on the other. Make sure you flip it over and see if it is coming out, if it's moving, because obviously if it's not moving, then more than likely you're just not hitting it hard enough. So, and in my case, I'm putting new ones in, so if you're putting new ones in, you don't have to worry about screwing up the old ones that you're taking out, since they're going to get tossed aside anyways. So after punching it out, this one, the inner bearing, that's it right there, didn't have divots, but there's plenty of surface area for you to get grip with the punch. And so I just went around left and right side, and then there's plenty of space. I went top and bottom, so you can hit it all around the ring there to punch it out. And so I'm hoping it just pulls right out now. And I forgot on this one, there's around the edge here, there's a rubber seal. This guy right there, so I've got to get that out as well. on the other bearings, that rubber seal was actually completely rotted out. Well, it was rotted out into two pieces. So there should only be one rubber seal there, and I'll show you the new one that I've got to put in, but keep an eye out for that. This one, it still has the lip there. I can grab it underneath. That's what's folding up right here on my thumb there. And so it feels like it's all in one piece, but mine was, my other one was rotted, and so it was in two pieces. So I'll go ahead and take this bearing out, take this rubber piece out, rubber seal, and then we'll have to get that race out as well. So I got the bearing out right there, inner bearings. The last shot, so I had it cross-eyed, cockeyed, whatever, in there. So I just had this guy, popped it underneath, and then just popped it right out. And so it didn't take a whole lot of force, just pulled back a little bit, and then all the tension went away from the bar, and literally just lifted the bearing right out. So now all that's left, that rubber seal that's around the edge, and that should come out along with the outer race, or the inner race. That's that silver piece right in there, so I'll flip it over and punch it out, just like I did the outer ones. So flip that over, look for those divots. If they're not visible, clean out some of that grease, and then go ahead and just start whacking it. And this one, unlike the outer bearing and outer race, there's a little bit of space in there, and so I'll just lay it flat on the table there and keep using the punch until I see it go all the way through. Then we'll start repacking the new ones and go from there. So what do we got?
Well, to drive in the new race for the bearing, I ground down the outside of the old race after we hammered it out, so that way I can use the old race to drive the new one in evenly. And since I ground it down, when it's in, it's not stuck. So I just put it on the wheel and just took down the outside a bit.
So that one you're holding is the old one that's ground down?
Yeah, old one, and then the new one. So just so that way you're not hitting it with a punch, because I know it's a lot of people do it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the right way. But instead of hitting it just around the outside and trying to get it flat, it's just pretty easy to do that. Throw that in, piece of wood, and then just hit it with a hammer and it'll go in flat. So it's pretty in there. So I'm trying to see if it's not all the way down. So now I'll take that and then with the punch just finish it the rest of the way. Okay, so that seems it's all the way down. There's no gap, cool. So that one's in, and then we'll do the same for the outer bearing. Put a glob of grease in your hand, and then with the bearing in your other, you just mash it in, and you're forcing grease into it. This is how you pack a bearing. They make a tool for it, but I don't know, it's just kind of messy. This is messy too, but you don't have to clean anything after. You just throw the gloves out. And you just keep packing it in. Yeah, because you can see the grease starting to come through. You just make your rounds, make sure it's all good. But yeah, so we'll fill this up or not fill it up, but we'll put grease in here, put the rear bearing in, and then pop the seal in, flip it over. I still need to pack the front bearing, or the outer bearing, but yeah, pretty simple. I put the inner bearing in.
Oh, because that's the inner side of the brake.
So this faces inside the van.
So the inner bearing is the bigger one.
Yeah. So put the seal in.
With the tapered end on the
You put the
facing inward.
spring side down. Yeah, because there's a little spring inside.
That little silver piece there.
Yeah, it's just a spring that goes all the way around.
So I forgot to grab footage of us putting it back on, but once you've got the brake disc here, so you'd have the two rivets, inner and outers, placed in, driven all the way down, with the open ends set in such a way that you can put the bearings in. So for the inner one, the inner bearings, the bigger one, that is going to have to go on, that has to go on when you place the whole plate on, because it's going to sit in the hole back there where the spindle goes, and it'll just slide on as you put the plate on. And then the outer bearing, you can put it on with the disc, with the plate, or you can put it on afterwards. There's going to be an open space there for it either way, so you'll be able to slide it on with the plate or after the plate. Once that's on, once the outer bearing's on, then that's when you would put the washer and you'll line it up. Like I showed at the beginning, you'll line up that tooth in the gap that they have set for it on the spindle, and then you'll put the axle nut on. You'll tighten that down until the whole brake plate is hard to turn. Then you back it off. You loosen it by, I believe, a quarter to half a turn. And it shouldn't be too hard to turn. Like right now, I'm having no issues turning that around. Once it's to the tightness that you want it to be, there's a little divot on the end of the spindle. Once it's as tight as you want it to be, at the end of the spindle, similar to the tooth for that washer, the gap for that washer, there's a little gap on the top and the bottom for the axle nut. So right where that axle nut is so the washer, the gap, I think it's towards the back, the rear end of the vehicle. It's on one of the two sides here. Then there's another gap on the top and bottom. So once the axle nut is tightened where you want, you take a sharp punch. This one was like a flat edge, where it was one long narrow edge. You can do that, or on the other side I use like a pinpoint punch, and you'll actually punch the axle nut right in that gap on the spindle. That way the axle nut doesn't loosen up and come off while you're driving. Punches it there so it doesn't spin around. When you have to replace it, it's soft enough that when you get a socket on there, it'll turn and it'll come off. But it's snug enough on there that when you're driving, it's not going to vibrate off. It'll keep it right there. So once that's on there, then if you haven't already, you would put the brake caliper back on, just opposite of the way that you took it off. You make sure that the hard line, you get the hard line through that bracket. This one right here, that curved piece in the back, you can see my finger. You'll have that go through this bracket connected to that soft line, a flex line right here. Once that's lined up, you would put those two bolts, the ones on the back of the caliper, put those back on, have it all snug up. And that's where you would actually feel where this is, because the brake might be touching it. Make sure that everything's lined up properly. Once that's all set, everything's where it needs to be, and you're sure of it, then that's when you want to punch it and have everything be where it's supposed to be. And so this is the driver's side, where there's that cable, the end of the cable coming out. So you would just put the cap back on. It's kind of a square hole, so you would just make sure it pops on and that the pin actually comes out. Once that's out, you put your C-clip back on. Make sure you kept that somewhere. That little C-clip. It'll clip on the edge. There's a little groove. I mean, if you took it off, you'll see where it went. There's a little groove for the C-clip to go. And then once that's on, you put the wheel back on, and you should be good to go. So I don't remember having issues with it the first time, but right now, putting the speedometer cable, the C-clip back on, when I was trying to put that cap on at the end of the spindle that it has the hole that the cable feeds through, couldn't quite get it, and so I kept fiddling with it, trying to get it lined up before I put the pushed the cap on. And so this last time I got it, but I still didn't have the groove for the clip quite yet, so I just got a couple of needle nose pliers and pulled it through until I could get that clip on. And I had to hold it with one hand while I put the clip on, at least started it with the other. Hopefully this video's helped you learn how to replace or repack the bearings, the front wheel bearings on your early Vanagon. And if I'm going too slow, then I mean, that's kind of the point of my videos. I'm trying to cover as many bases as I can, be as simple and easy to understand what I'm covering for people such as myself with pretty limited car knowledge. And, you know, maybe it would help you, I don't know, watch it 1 1/4, 1.5 times speed, get to just what you're looking for. But regardless, one way or the other, I hope this video is helping someone out there, because I've had a hard time finding a whole lot of info on these early model Vanagons. Everyone has the, unsurprisingly, more popular later model ones. But anyways, yeah, the theme of these videos is to just cover all the bases, so they're going to be kind of slow. But if there's anything that I missed, which I'm sure there's a couple finer points that I missed, or if you just want clarification, please drop stuff in the comments. I'll respond to them as soon as I get them, pretty much. I'm checking these videos every so often. But anyways, have a good rest of your day, everyone. Good luck working out there.